panel is all about the end consumer, so customers wanting more than they ever have before. So consumers wanting to have better nutrition, sustainably sourced, product that's Instagrammable, available to be received quickly as possible, et cetera, et cetera. In England, we say consumers want their cake and eat it, right? But we also know that underlying that, when consumers want indulgence, they want a burger, they want a pizza, they also want to have a blowout, right? So that balance between nutrition and health, and also the realities of the consumer of today. So today's panel is all built through the consumer's eyes from around Southeast Asia. We will be joined by five actual consumers from the markets to explain their kind of history and their perspective. So our first area is the area of diabetes. And for those of you that don't know, Southeast Asia will have an increase of around 68%, reaching 152 million people with diabetes by 2045, and with a 30% increase, reaching about 11.3% of all people in Southeast Asia will have diabetes, confirmed.
Sugar as an ingredient is a singular ingredient, but it works in a system, right? So on one hand, we do have our biological need for sugar. It's very much primate in us. So we're always going to seek out sugar as a reward. And then on the other hand, we have the governments who are playing kind of a very strong role in terms of reducing our sugar. But what I think is more interesting to see and to view sugar as is to take it out of its ingredient system and put it into the reward system. So how do human beings get rewarded? And why is sugar playing such a massive role in that system? What we're seeing right now is actually there's another reward channel that is actually, consumers actually want more than sugar, and that is in texture, right? Because the textural aspect of food is giving them a higher kind of pleasure feeling than sugar on its own. So what you'll see now is because we have an entryway in sugar, you'll start to see sugar treats have a lot more texture to them, a lot more crunch, a lot more multi-sensorial within our kind of internal stereo system. So I think when we start to see sugar in that aspect, then the answer isn't so clear. It's actually how do we play with other things in the reward system to deliver pleasure to the consumer.
So Aoife, on this one, maybe start us off. So we hear here that there's a direct assumption between bloating and dairy consumption, right? So can you maybe give me some examples? Like I'm assuming that is not necessarily the case, but there was a direct kind of correlation that Zavina's friend said, look, you're bloated, therefore you must be dairy intolerant. But is that a direct analogy?
Yeah, look, there's lots of different reasons why someone might experience gut issues. So a food intolerance, so perhaps lactose intolerance, like she mentioned, gluten insensitivity, or other small fermentable fibres known as FODMAPs. They can all cause bloating within the gut. So it could be a number of those. And I really liked the way she was saying she's, taking an approach where she's eliminating and seeing how she's feeling, because that's how a dietitian would propose you work. So you would cut out some foods and see, do you feel better? There are other reasons why she might have gut health issues. Stress is a key one. If you have stress, there's a really direct link between our gut and our brain. So if we're feeling stressed, we're likely to feel it in our stomach as well. So there's lots of reasons why she might be feeling that, but yeah, she's doing the right thing in terms of eliminating the foods that she thinks it might be and then testing.
And Oliver, we'd heard about fermentation, and that's something that seems to be a growing trend in food across the board, in pickling and fermented drinks, except the bushes they have in mixology. Tell us a bit about the trend in fermentation and from a hospitality perspective.
Yeah, I think this is a really important and ultimately will be quite an influential trend, because this is one that goes across sort of what would be my background in food service, which is relatively uniquely fine dining, like fine dining or very close to. But fermentation is one of these things that can definitely permeate into a much larger food sector. And I think probably precision fermentation in general is, as an emerging tech, is one of the most interesting sort of flavor creation mechanisms that we're seeing at the moment. From a personal perspective, we do a lot of fermentation in restaurant in at least in Penang. We have like separate chillers just to ferment stuff in, and we're actually, to speak to sort of gut health maybe more so than lactose intolerance, like designing menus in a way that it should limit people's glucose spikes. It should have anti-inflammatory properties throughout the menu. while trying not to compromise anything in terms of deliciousness. And I think you'll see more of that in the fine dining space as well, hopefully, as well as sort of the mass market space. The incorporation of probiotic elements, whether it's fermented foods or even, encapsulated probiotics or mixing probiotics into a fast food experience, is a really compelling notion to me. I think we have to be a little bit careful about it in general, but it seems like a really good solution to avoid scenarios like she's facing in the video, and like anybody might face after they have like a really heavy meal or an indulgent meal. Let's go with that. Yeah.
Okay, so we talk about some of the health aspects. Now talk about some of the consumer changes, which is the aging population. For those of you that haven't noticed, countries all over the world are facing aging populations and reducing birth rates. One of the interesting stats that I just saw on the news yesterday, which made me smile as we're in this, in South Korea they sold more prams for dogs than they did for children last year. Right? It's kind of scary the amount of changes they've got there. Singapore is one of the world's lowest fertility rates, and at the same time, the population is not just aging, but it's aging rapidly. I'm just reading the stats so I get them correct. So in 2010, 1 in 10 were aged 65 and above. In 2020, it's now 1 in 6. And by 2030, 1 in 4 in Singapore will be over 65.
So from our 30s, we're losing our muscle mass at 5% each decade. And that's why then we might have less mobility. And that's why Linda was struggling with being able to play with her grandchildren. So by being conscious of that early in life and maintaining high protein and good physical activity, we can maintain that muscle mass so that we're able to get up and out of a chair, get in and out of bed, play with our grandchildren when we're older. We do have an increased requirement for protein to maintain that muscle mass. We don't want to lose it. That's called sarcopenia, when you lose your muscle mass. So higher protein in smaller portions is what we kind of mentioned. So I think there's a lot of room for innovation there, for creative ideas and how to maybe spread that throughout the day in maybe 6 small meals rather than three meals or whatever the routine is. Another nutritional requirement here is around our cognitive health and supporting that so that there's no cognitive decline. So omega-3s are really, really important for that. And then as well, fibre to help with gut motility, to prevent any discomfort there. So they're the main things to consider when we're thinking about an older population.
I think what's really kind of the cool part about having these aging populations is they represent a significant market share that has usually the lion's share of income, and sort of the intersection of a sustainable oriented economy and then a elderly focused economy is probably like one of the biggest business opportunities in the past, 200 years. Like it's outside of war, but I think those are such galactic shifts in terms of our populations, and they are not marketplaces that are really catered to or focused on yet. I know that there are massive studies ongoing into sort of what they're calling like the silver marketplace, but yeah, it's not a focus point for a lot of people. Everybody still wants to do young, sexy things and have ads for like really mobile people doing really cool stuff. And in some way that is advertising to older people, but I do think there's a massive market opportunity between sustainability and the elderly that someone just needs to zone in on and hit.
So the last one is the kind of younger population, the one starting out, right? So 67% of Singaporeans actually add proactive health ingredients to their lifestyle, wanting to add nutrition or supplementation for future in life.
So I think what's really rich is not what she said, right? Because I'm actually kind of connecting the dots. She's got a hectic lifestyle. She's got her meals planned, but equally she's out on the go a lot. So this consumer is really interesting to analyze, especially as a futurist, because what she really needs is not what she's verbalizing. And one thing she didn't mention is how many snacks she's having, right? And we do know that snacks with this particular age group is growing at a very high rate. So why is she excluding snacks? And for her, I think, she's actually looking at snacks as a fortitude to her diet. She's asking for snacks to have vitamin C or some kind of fortification and additions in order for her to not consider it as a unhealthy choice. And I think that's what's interesting about this consumer, is because she's, the question we always pose is whether or not this consumer will kind of let go of their meal times. Yet at the same time, you can see kind of her trying to balance what is traditionally wise in our food theory versus what she's actually doing in real life. So unpicking that, I think, just unpicking that and seeing what we can do within the space will give us lots of opportunity to play in portion sizes, in taste profiles, in experimentation, in premiumization, because she's experimenting, she's inventing her own diet.